So we often get asked, do electric cars really need to get serviced? And if so, how often? What gets serviced on them and how much does it cost? So stay with us to find out. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us and welcome to Electric Car Australia, the independent EV and sustainable living Aussie YouTube channel. So we've recently got our first service done on our MG ZS EV and we're going to have a bit of a chat to you guys about that today. And we're also going to compare it with another EV, the Hyundai Kona, and we'll look at the servicing costs over the 7-year period and what they actually do. But first, let's have a look under the bonnet of the MG ZS EV and see what we think was done on the first service. So I guess the first thing to say is electric cars definitely need to get serviced. Now the service schedules and what is actually done and the pricing might be a little bit different to a fossil fueled vehicle or an internal combustion engine vehicle that you're used to. And we'll have a look at some of that shortly when we jump inside. So this was our first service, as we mentioned, which is scheduled at 12 months or 20,000 kilometres. Now we're about halfway between both those. The car's got about 14,000 kilometres on it when we got it serviced, and it was about 15 months given that we had some complications over Christmas, etc. with COVID and all that sort of stuff. And we took it to our local MG dealer. That wasn't a problem. They understood that. They were having their own challenges with staffing and that sort of stuff. So as I mentioned, we'll jump inside later and we'll go through what was actually done or via the service schedule, I guess. But having a quick look under the bonnet here. So our regular viewers will know we've done some different videos on what's under the bonnet, what all the components are. So we won't go into that today, but basically very little stuff under here to be serviced as part of a normal scheduled service. So you've got some coolant there. Don't know which way around it is, but one's battery coolant and one is motor coolant, the electric inverter and all the motor and that sort of stuff, the electronics. I believe they're two separate systems. Also got some brake fluid there, and we've got the washer bottle. Now realistically, that's it. It's a maintenance-free 12-volt battery, like most 12-volt batteries these days. So yeah, you've got 4 liquids, 1, 2, 3, 4. They would check those. And besides that, I didn't notice that there was anything else done under here. You'll notice this dust. Now I often just get the air compressor and lightly blow that off. This car is prone to getting a lot of dust up in here. This is the top of your AC charger, and as you can see there's a lot of dust in there, and the reason for that is, and we've shown this in our previous video, underneath there's not a cowl, so a lot of dust comes up under here. Anyway, that's a side note, nothing to do with the service. So realistically, under the bonnet, that's about it. Not much else happens. So I thought this one was interesting. So we drive an EV, we're quite proud of that. We've got an EV YouTube channel, we've got a sign on the side of the car, and I pick it up from the service and lo and behold, what do I see? A Valvoline service sticker. So I guess this is not a big deal in the overall scheme of things. As most people would know, the mechanics put that on there and it's a little reminder with the date and that sort of stuff. But not being a big supporter of fossil fuels, I think we're going to take that off. So there it is. That's our little sticker. So let's see if we can remove that one. Not too keen on having the old Valvoline. There we go, gone. So for me, that's a big improvement. First thing, we get rid of the sticker. I can put a reminder on my calendar. I don't need the fossil fuel sticker on there. Hi, we've just jumped inside and shut the door because it's a little bit noisy out there. We're beside a road, and that's one thing you notice when you have an EV, just how quiet they are. But when you've got the big diesels and motorcycles and stuff going past, they're quite noisy, particularly when you're trying to do a video. So look, I'll pop this up on the screen, guys, but this is basically the invoice from the service, and I'll quickly go through some of the things that it covers off. So as I mentioned, 20,000 kilometre, 12-month service, which is the first one. That's an MG precise price service. So that means the service prices are locked in for the first 7 years. And this may change or might be different to some of the other MGs. We were one of the first MGs in Queensland. So I know they have changed the warranty slightly and the servicing schedules. So this is just based on our car. Other people's cars might be slightly different. But basically, they check everything. So there's no parts to replace. There's no things to do except check. So we won't go through each of these for the video, but you can see them on the screen. They check that there's any outstanding service campaigns. They check wiring, lights, horns, windscreen wipers, all that standard stuff. Check the air conditioning system. They lubricate the door hinges. That was one thing I did notice, believe it or not. One of the only things I guess you could visually see that they'd done. I think they did open the doors and they'd put a little bit of lubricant spray on the doors, because I did notice that the dust had been slightly blown away. But not a lot else I noticed. They've checked the high voltage harnesses for wear and tear, all that sort of stuff. Windscreen washer fluid, one of the only things also that you could do. Brake boosters, check that. Check vent valves. So yeah, lots of stuff there. It is really just checking. So no consumables, just labour. So then on the second page, there is a couple of pages. So the second page, they check wheel bearings, drive shaft boots for damage, suspension steering components, tyre pressures, rotate the tyres as necessary. They weren't rotated, so that wasn't needed. Check all underbody parts for leaks, damage, check high voltage battery state of charge, final inspection and road test. So yeah, pretty much it's just checking stuff. Now you would expect that on a brand new car, first service, not a lot to do. That cost us $171. So as I said, that's the set price servicing. Interestingly, there was a $10 charge for shop supplies and environmental levy. Not sure what the environmental levy is for on an EV, but there you go, $10 for that. Maybe it was $10 for the rag, but we don't even need a rag to check the dipsticks. So anyway, $171. So look, in the overall scheme of things, that's not expensive, I guess, but what are you actually getting for $171? There's not a lot. I would say that service probably took physically 15 minutes maximum. Yes, there's a little bit of admin either way, but that's what it is. First service done, $171. So let's have a look at the MG ZS EV scheduled servicing for the next 7 years. So again, I'll pop this one up on the screen so you guys can see it better. First service there, $168 including GST, so ours was a couple of dollars more. Second service, $271. Third service, $168. The big one for the MG is at 4 years and 80,000 kilometres, $827. So we'll come back to that one and have a chat about that. 5 years, 100,000, 168. Next one's 271, 420, and 6 years. And rounding out, year 7 at 140,000 kilometres is $168. So interestingly, I added up the 7-year fixed price servicing on the petrol model ZST, which is the most equivalent vehicle to this one. And I'll put those up on the screen as well. Petrol was $253, $301, $304, $466, $253, $351 and $253. So that gives us a total of $2,181 for the petrol model. And the EV comes in, believe it or not, at $2,041. Very strange. And that comes back to that $827 service at year 4. So I'm not 100% sure what's involved in that. I know there's coolant changes, so there could be oil fluids. So if there is oil fluids, that would be brake fluid. The coolant in the electronics, the electric motor and also the battery system. But let's face it, how much would that coolant be? 20 litres maybe, 30 litres, don't know. And there's also some gearbox oil. So the ZS's have an electric motor bolted to the side of a single speed gearbox. It does have gear oil in it. But as far as I know, they're the only 3 fluids in the car. So that $827 seems very excessive to change 3 fluids. Now keep in mind, when you're comparing petrol and EVs, we're talking here about labour and the set consumables. So if that is for coolant changes, gearbox oil change and brake fluid, that would include those fluids, but no other parts. So when we looked at those comparison of prices, $2,181 for the petrol and $2,041 for the EV, that's before any other parts. So if your petrol needs spark plugs out of sync of the cycles, or it needs a new hydraulic hose or all that sort of stuff, that's when it'll cost you more. So we all know that internal combustion engines cost more to service and maintain because they're a very complex piece of machinery and they've got a lot more moving parts and mechanical parts. But I was very surprised at MG that the EV and the internal combustion engine service prices, scheduled service prices, are so close. Now I think they're doing that to keep the dealers happy because dealers make most of their money out of services and parts. So we'll have a look at Hyundai shortly and we'll see the difference between those guys. But yeah, something to keep in mind. And on that note, we will also talk about independent EV mechanics and repairers shortly and what your thoughts are around going to those. So let's check out the Hyundai Kona Electric set scheduled service prices. Now, the MG has a 7-year warranty and it also has 7-year set price servicing. The Hyundai has 8-year set price servicing. But for the purposes of this comparison, I've brought it back to 7 years as well. So I'll pop it up on the screen. The Hyundai, over the 7 years, the Kona Electric is $1,155 for a total of 7 years scheduled servicing. The petrol is $2,090. So the EV is roughly half. Now that's what I would have expected with the MG as well. So I think MG had taken the mickey there a little bit with the price of the EV servicing. The Hyundai is a lot more reasonable and makes sense. So $1,100 for the EV, $2,100 for the petrol model. Now, of course, again, that doesn't include parts and any unexpected components, etc., that need to be repaired. But that is a better reflection of EV servicing costs. So as I mentioned before, they're definitely cheaper to service. They are around 50%. That's the general figure that most people use and most manufacturers use. But that's before your parts. So once you start adding parts in, it becomes a lot better than 50%. As our regular viewers will know, we've got a Volkswagen Passat. It's quite an old model now, 2007, and one of our big expensive services was around, I think, 120,000. We had to get the DSG automatic gearbox serviced. That was about $1,200 in one hit just for that service because of the gearbox. Another big one I think was around the 90,000. The timing belt had to be done. It's a diesel engine, and that timing belt again was up around the $1,000 mark. So no timing belts with EVs, no complicated expensive automatic gearboxes, etc. So they're the things that you're really going to save on with an EV. So let's have a quick chat about whether you can go to an independent authorised service centre or whether you should go back to your dealer. Now what I'll say here is this is really a personal choice. Your warranties can be affected by this, and also Australian consumer law comes into play here, which is probably a little bit stronger than some other countries. So basically Australian consumer law says that the dealer cannot force you to take the car back to the dealership for servicing as long as you get it serviced somewhere that's qualified to service the car and they use either genuine parts or original equipment manufactured compliant parts, so OEM parts. So what that means is the parts need to be of similar or better quality, or equal, sorry, I should say, or better quality than the original genuine parts. So the thing about EVs is, obviously 100% electric vehicles haven't been around for that long. We're excusing Tesla, which obviously have been around longer but have their own service centres. So people are a little bit concerned about whether mechanics have the knowledge, expertise and training to service 100% electrics. Now, I've done a quick Google search of electric vehicle mechanics and I was surprised there was actually a fair few come up. Now, the reason for this is that people have been working on hybrids. Now, don't get me started on Toyota's self-charging hybrid, but what I'm talking about here is hybrids like the Toyota Camry hybrid, where they've got a petrol motor and they've also got some electric components and a small electric motor. So there is mechanics around that have done that additional training to service those predominantly Toyota vehicles. So those guys do know a little bit about electric vehicles, mainly in the hybrid space. So what you'd want to do if you were talking to one of those guys and you had a different vehicle, make sure that they've got all these technical specifications and they've got access to the diagnostics and all that stuff they'd need for your 100% vehicle, 100% electric vehicle, I should say. But providing you go to somebody that's registered, qualified and got all the training that they need, and they're a registered mechanic, because keep in mind they're not only looking at the electrics, they're looking at things like wheel bearings and all that sort of normal stuff that normal cars have. There's no argument that you would be breaching your warranty by taking it to those guys. So I won't put the name of any of those guys up because by the time you watch this video, some of them could be out of date and there'll be many more. So just do a Google search on electric vehicle service or EV mechanics in your area and just see what's around. We'll be doing an interview with Graham down at Oz DIY Electric Cars or Electric Vehicles at Springwood. He's just down the road. Again, our regular viewers will have heard me mention him before. They've been into EVs and EV conversions for a number of years. They're doing some fantastic stuff down there. They're even developing some specific IP that they're licensing overseas. So those guys would be more than qualified to work on this car. And at some point in the future, we may be thinking about using those guys instead of MG. But as I mentioned, it really is a personal thing. Some people swear by going back to the dealer. They're not going to get into any argy-bargy, etc. So they just go back to the dealer each time. That's fine. But if you are looking to save a few dollars, or you want an alternative offering, or there's no dealer that services an EV near you, you might look elsewhere. And that is one of the things, if you go into a Hyundai dealer, not every Hyundai dealer services EVs. I'm not sure about MG. I know my local MG dealer and the ones around me all do the electrics, but not all the Hyundai ones do. So depending on the brand of vehicle you've got, just check your local dealer to make sure that they do the electric vehicles. So to sum up, you do need to get your electric vehicle serviced. I recommend following the service schedules. Every brand of electric vehicle will have a recommended service schedule. Stick to that to make sure you have worry-free motoring and also keep compliant with your warranty. The pricing of those services will generally be about 50% less than you would have for an internal combustion engine, and significantly more savings on any wear and tear parts. And an FYI on electric vehicles, your biggest expense over the labour for a service will be tyres. That's pretty much the only thing, the only consumable that wears out on EVs. You don't wear your brakes out because electric cars have regen braking, so like exhaust brakes on large trucks, when you pull your foot off, your regen braking kicks in and that's slowing the car down, so you're not wearing out brake pads. So EVs are perfect for city driving, stop-start driving, absolutely well suited to it. There is other options to service your EV besides your dealer, but again, that's a personal choice, and be aware there is limited numbers, so just do a good search, talk to some other EV owners in your area, join your local Australian Electric Vehicle Owners Club, Tesla Owners Club, or your Nissan Owners Club. Talk to local owners in the area, find out where they get theirs serviced. And that's about it. Servicing an electric vehicle, so much cheaper than a petrol or diesel, so much simpler. The sun's going down, so we're losing light quickly. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate everybody's support. If you haven't, please follow us on the socials. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and also Instagram. Click that subscribe button if you haven't. I'm pleasantly surprised our subscriber numbers have gone up about 1% recently, so really appreciate your support. For each new subscriber we get, the YouTube algorithms just bump us up the hierarchy of EV channels slightly more. If you can, please flick us a small donation via PayPal. We'll put the link in the show notes. All that money goes towards us upgrading our gear to improve the quality of our videos. So all comes back to you guys. And of course, stay safe, look after your friends, and we'll talk soon. Bye.